$80 billion from SNAP. The logic is hard to follow. By leaving millions without health care and struggling to buy groceries, higher education will apparently just become more accessible. It is no wonder that when the American people finally had the chance to see what was in this hideous bill, it was so unpopular that my Republican counterparts had to rebrand
last 6 months and say because our reforms, all these things are happening. We're now about to take care of that. I think the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is how little we know in our country about capitalism. We are the #1 destination in the world because of something called capitalism. Now, just quickly, what does capitalism mean, and what does it mean to this industry here? It's about return on investment. It's competition, it's merit, it's value.
This hearing started like a typical attack on Republican spending cuts, but then Burgess Owens shifted the entire conversation. Instead of arguing about one bill, he asked a bigger question. If America has spent decades pouring money into education, why are students still drowning in debt while universities keep getting richer? And honestly, that's where the debate gets uncomfortable, because the issue isn't just access to college anymore. It's whether the system is actually delivering value. Owens reframed the argument around accountability, incentives, and return on investment, and whether schools are facing any real pressure to improve outcomes at all.
Claim that their solution in the one big beautiful bill will somehow make college cheaper for working families. This is the same bill that cut $1 trillion out of Medicaid and over $180 billion from SNAP. The logic is hard to follow. By leaving millions without health care and struggling to buy groceries, higher education will apparently just become more accessible. It is no wonder that when the American people finally had the chance to see what was in this hideous bill, it was so unpopular that my Republican counterparts had to rebrand the name. But just because you put working families in the title doesn't mean you are not screwing them over. The reality is there is no amount of sugarcoating that can undo the damage that will be done by this disastrous legislation.
I want to start off with just, first of all, agreeing, Ms. Morgan, with your comments about how bad things are. Explosion of tuition, enrollment in which kids come in, they enroll, they quit, they leave with debt they'll never pay off, with job skills they'll never have, and not be able to really build the American dream. But this isn't from the last 6 months of the Family Working Tax Plan. It's from the last 16 years, when in 2010, President Obama, through the Affordable Care Act, took everything from the private sector and put it into the government. So the government has controlled this for the last 16 years. We cannot look at the last 6 months and say because our reforms, all these things are happening. We're now about to take care of that. I think the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is how little we know in our country about capitalism. We are the #1 destination in the world because of something called capitalism. Now, just quickly, what does capitalism mean, and what does it mean to this industry here? It's about return on investment. It's competition, it's merit, it's value, and the product of all that is profit. Now, if it's a good program, there's a lot of profit, which it should be. It should spread throughout the entire country. People should be wanting to take advantage of it. If it's a terrible product, it should go broke. What we're finding out is that the government is insulated from this concept. They can have a terrible competition, no value, no merit, and still make a lot of profit off the customer, the students, who pay their life's blood for the rest of their life trying to pay off loans. So we need to get back to teaching that. I think that when I listen to my friends here from Utah and Florida, I'll say this about Utah. We lead the country in terms of small business startups. There's an entrepreneurial concept. There's a culture in which we're trying to figure out how to give the best return on investment to where we're dealing with. And I think the same thing, the way I listen to how you guys are solving things, same thing with Florida. We need to realize that government solutions have never worked. I just came back from Latin America last week. They are realizing after the last couple of years, they want to get away from that stuff. So no, it is not the government that's going to give us the out of this. It's going to be entrepreneurs, innovators, those who truly are in the game for the right reasons. That is, to make sure our kids are #1, and not the institutions, not the professors, not those around just kind of sucking in everything they can from government payouts. So I'm excited about the fact that we're having this conversation. We can all agree it's broken. It's cost too much. We're getting too little of a return on investment with our kids coming out, not being prepared to go to work, not being hopeful for their future, being angry about everything. That's not what our education should be about. And the other thing is this: let's just make sure we're transparent enough that everyone realizes they don't have to go into debt to go to four-year college. How about trades? If that could be their way out, if they could look at that as being their way to achieve their dreams, let them go for that. I think it's very helpful that we finally have competition for higher education. It's going to make higher education better. It's going to make sure that the best prove themselves, and outcomes will allow parents to say, okay, I will invest in this, or the kids will invest in this because it'll give me a good return on investment. And if it does not, then that institution should go broke, period. So I'm excited about the fact we're finally, over the last 6 months, putting in reforms. 6 months. So please, as you go back and think about how terrible things are, it's not because of the Republicans' one big, beautiful bill.
Everybody keeps framing this as just another argument about Republican spending cuts. But Ilhan Omar actually starts from a much broader concern about how those cuts affect working families across multiple systems at once. Her argument is that reducing federal support in areas like Medicaid and SNAP doesn't exist in isolation. It creates pressure on households that are already financially stretched, and that same pressure carries into education, affordability, and long-term opportunity. So in her framing, you can't separate education policy from the wider safety net, because families experience all of it together. But Burgess Owens shifts the entire direction of the hearing away from that framing and into something more structural. Instead of focusing on specific programs or budget lines, he raises a different question. If the United States has continuously increased spending on education over decades, why are students still leaving school with higher debt, weaker job alignment, and less confidence in their future? That question introduces his core idea, return on investment. Not as a slogan, but as a way of evaluating whether the education system is actually producing results that match the level of resources being put into it. From his perspective, higher education has expanded significantly in funding, administration, and federal involvement, but the outcomes for students haven't improved at the same pace. He then takes it a step further by challenging how the system is structured. Owens argues that universities don't operate under the same pressure as competitive markets. In most markets, poor performance leads to consequences: loss of demand, reduced revenue, or even failure. But in higher education, institutions can continue raising tuition, expanding administrative costs, and receiving public support even when student outcomes remain weak. That disconnect between performance and consequence is what he's really pointing to. Ilhan Omar's response operates on a different logic. Her focus is on how policy decisions overlap in real life. From her perspective, separating education from healthcare, food assistance, and other social programs ignores how working-class families actually experience financial pressure. So tying those areas together is not accidental. It reflects an argument about interconnected systems rather than isolated policies. The debate then moves into a deeper disagreement about what education is supposed to be. Owens questions the idea that a four-year university should be the default path for every student. Instead, he highlights trade careers and vocational training as legitimate alternatives that often lead directly to stable, well-paying jobs without the same debt burden. That shifts the conversation from a single academic pipeline to multiple definitions of success. He also points to what he sees as a growing imbalance inside the system: expanding bureaucracy, rising administrative layers, and increasing costs alongside concerns about declining academic performance and basic proficiency. The tension he highlights is that higher spending has not consistently produced higher outcomes. So what this exchange ultimately reveals is not just a disagreement over funding, but two different ways of defining success. Omar's approach prioritizes access, protection, and stability across interconnected public systems. Owens' approach prioritizes accountability, competition, and measurable results within those systems. And that's why this hearing stands out, because the real divide isn't about a single bill or a single cut, but about whether education should be judged primarily by how many people it includes, or by what it actually delivers once they're inside it.